50th anniversary celebration of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company.
How do you do, everybody? This is Ted Husing. The American Telephone and Telegraph Company invites you to join it in celebrating its 50th anniversary. Let's start with some music, and then, just to make sure that everyone is present and accounted for, we'll telephone the four corners of the United States. Our conductor, Andre Kostelanetz, will prepare the way by bringing us across the country in a medley of songs you all know well. California, Here I Come, St. Louis Blues, Chicago, East Side, West Side. Andre Kostelanetz and his orchestra and chorus. Now let's check in just 5 of the 16,800,000 telephones in the country and use only 17,000 of the 80 million miles of wire that extend from the deepest forest in Oregon to the top of the Empire State Building in New York City. We'll telephone right now to the four corners of the United States: San Diego, California, Eastport, Maine, Bellingham, Washington, and Key West, Florida. There's a telephone right here beside me. Let's ask the operator for long distance. Long distance, please. I want to talk to the managers of the telephone exchanges in 4 different places. First, San Diego, California, then Eastport, Maine, Bellingham, Washington, and Key West, Florida.
What is your number, please?
Wickersham 2, 2000.
Will you hold the line, please?
All right, thank you. There's a real thrill in those words, hold the line, please. Here I am calling to the four corners of the country, across 3 million square miles, and the operator says, hold the line, please. And I've just heard that coast-to-coast long distance is only 20 years old. That makes this year another anniversary for the AT&T company. 1915 was the date of the opening of the first transcontinental line. Now there are 5 transcontinental routes and hundreds of connections daily across them, showing how the telephone has made the United States a nation of neighbors.
Ready with San Diego.
Hello?
Scott speaking. Southern California Telephone Company, San Diego.
Oh, hello, Mr. Scott. Well, welcome to our party. I suppose out there in San Diego you had a swim before breakfast this morning.
Not quite, but it's a great day for it. Sunshine and everything. This afternoon, everybody out here is tuned in for the anniversary celebration.
Say, I understand you're having a big exposition in San Diego this summer.
We certainly are. It opens on May 29th in beautiful Balboa Park. And even though you listeners may be near or far, we urge that you visit this wonderful exposition.
Well, thanks, Mr. Scott, and our very best to San Diego. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. Husing.
I'll bet that's Eastport now. Hello?
This is Herbert Martin, General Manager of the Eastern Telephone and Telegraph Company, speaking from our Eastport office.
Say, we're certainly glad to hear from you, Mr. Martin. Tell me, what's Eastport most noted for? You know, I've never been up there.
Eastport is the most easterly point in the United States. Probably it's most famous for its sardine fisheries. In fact, I suppose you'd call it the sardine capital of the country.
How's the weather up your way today?
It is 62 degrees here. It'll be a while yet before we can go swimming. And that's quite a sport here with a tide of 28 feet. Say, I'd sure like to be with you in New York to help put the 50th candle on the birthday cake.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Martin. Well, we wish you could be here, too. But I guess in this telephone business, you've got to be on call nearly every minute. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. Husing.
I'm ready for Bellingham, Washington now.
Will you hold the line, please?
Boy, we're certainly traveling this afternoon. Buck Rogers in the 25th century hasn't a thing on us.
Hello, Ted Houston.
Hmm.
This is B.F. Reno of the Pacific Telephone and Telegraph Company. Eastport, Maine may be the sardine capital of the world, but Bellingham, Washington is the salmon capital of the world.
You win, Mr. Reno. Say, I hear Clark Gable and Loretta Young were up near you a few weeks ago making a picture.
Yes, they were near Mount Baker, making a movie of the Jack London story, Call of the Wild. Mount Baker is an easy drive from here. Even in summer, we can reach snow in an hour or two.
Oh, say, I hope the beautiful scenery isn't preventing a big turnout at your radio dials to celebrate the telephone company's 50th anniversary.
Not a bit of it, Mr. Husing. We're all listening. And here's a toast to the next 50 years of the Bell system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reno. Goodbye. Hello, who have you got for me now?
Ready with Key West, Florida.
Mr. Husing?
Mm-hmm.
This is Victor Poe of the Southern Bell Telephone and Telegraph Company, speaking from the office in Key West.
How do you do, Mr. Poe? I was down your way this winter, and from the looks of things, Florida must have had a wonderful season.
We certainly did. There were about 2 million visitors this past winter, which makes Florida rank second to Switzerland as the greatest resort section in the world.
Say, isn't Key West the place where those telephone cables cross to Cuba?
Yes, sir. 4 of the 5 longest telephone cables in the world cross from here to Havana. If you come to Florida next winter, come on down to Key West and we'll have some sail fishing.
Say, that's a date, Mr. Poe. Thanks a lot and goodbye.
So long, Mr. Husing.
Well, believe me, that was the fastest ride I've ever had. 17,000 miles, all in the space of a few minutes. A little later in the show, we'll do some more telephoning. We're going to call some famous people. But right now, standing here beside me, is one of the foremost commentators of the day, a man you know well. You've heard him tell the human side of the news on radio and screen, and you've read his interesting stories in your local newspapers. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me real pleasure to introduce to you that ace reporter and brilliant commentator, and your chief operator today, Edwin C. Hill.
The call of the telephone, the always thrilling summons of the spirit of communications. Of all our American gifts to humanity, the telephone, I think, is the achievement in which we can have the most glowing pride, for it is so distinctively American in its origin and its magical development down to this tumultuous hour. It made our people articulate. It has drawn America together. It has made neighbors of us all. The telephone bridges distance. It saves time. It brings security. It reaches friends. It cements family ties. It destroys isolation. It spells hospitality. If the telephone service should suddenly be thrown into disorder, if the nearly 17 million little bells which signal mind to mind and heart to heart should suddenly fall dumb and silent, what chaos would result? Streets and elevators would be choked by hordes of messengers shuffling on slow feet to replace the swift leap of the electric telephone. Every hour in the day would be a rush hour in our cities. Transportation systems would break down. All the delicately adjusted systems of trade and supply would be stunned into paralysis. But we would feel the blow more severely because of the coma into which our safety and rescue forces would fall. Police, firemen, and hospital would be crippled at a stroke. No doctor could be summoned in haste. No nurses rushed to the bedside of the desperately ill, and the whole fabric of life would be shattered and torn. And thus the flow of modern life in government, business, social contacts is dependent upon the telephone. Every day, the telephone saves lives, guides destinies, helps shape the endless course of events that make history. And right at this moment, there are hundreds of thousands of such calls in progress. From the many important and interesting telephone calls that have taken place since the beginning of 1934 and have been featured in the newspapers of the day, we have selected 4 significant calls. Now, you will hear these telephone calls reenacted in dramatic form. Now, here's the first one, as reported in Time magazine, a call which a certain newspaper editor up in Ontario, Canada, will never forget.
Calendar Weekly.
Hello. This is Oliver Dion at Lake Nipisi. How much would it cost to have a piece put in the paper about 5 babies being born?
5 babies? Do you mean quintuplets?
Yes. 5 babies. All girl babies. All at one time. I would like to put a notice in the
Notice? Why, man alive, you'll have headlines in every paper in the world. Free.
While the Calendar Ontario operator held the line open, a reporter took down the facts which became the biggest human interest story of the year. And thus the telephone was the first step in transmitting the news which circled the globe and occupied many thousands of lines in newspapers everywhere. Here's another telephone call in Chicago last October.
Hello?
Chicago Federal Bureau of Investigation, U.S. Department of Justice.
Right.
Mr. Sam Cowley, please. Washington is calling.
This is Cowley speaking.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation calling. Is your party?
Hello, Sam.
Hello?
This is John Edgar Hoover.
Oh, hello, Mr. Hoover.
We have a lead for you on Babyface Nelson. He's reported moving about near Chicago with another man and a woman. They travel in a new Ford sedan, Illinois license tag number 638578.
638578.
Right.
All right, Mr. Hoover. Thank you.
Thus did a telephone call set in motion the manhunt which resulted in the capture of the bullet-ridden body of Babyface Nelson, then public enemy number 1. Now let's hear a strange telephone call that took place just about a year ago. Sylvester Harris, a Mississippi Negro, is about to lose his farm. With mortgage foreclosure staring him in the face, he has put in a long-distance call.
Hello, operator. Say you got a report on that Washington call of mine yet? Yes. This call is from Sylvester Harris to Franklin D. Roosevelt. The president, that's right. Sure, I'll hold the wire.
Say, Sylvester, you plumb crazy. How you expect to get through 500
Yes, operator. Yes, all right, yeah. Hello? Yes, Mr. President Roosevelt. This is Sylvester. Oh, Sylvester Harris. I'm a farmer, live in Columbus. No, sir. No, Columbus, Mississippi, Mr. President.
Good judgment.
There's a man down here getting ready to take my land, and I wants to know what to do. The papers say to call you, and I does, and here I is. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Good Lord, Sylvester, what'd he say?
The president says, quiet like. Sylvester, he say, I'll investigate, and you'll hear from me.
And that telephone call brought results. The case was investigated and the moratorium on the mortgage was arranged. Now, here's a strange case just a month or two ago in which the telephone was the means of saving a life. Myron Mittelman, 16, husky, youthful explorer, brought back from Arizona one of those big poisonous lizards, a Gila monster. And while feeding the creature, young Myron is bitten. His hand begins to swell up immediately. The pain is almost unbearable and grows worse every minute. He's rushed off to Caledonia Hospital in Brooklyn. And while he lies on a hospital bed, bravely holding his fears in check, the doctors consult.
I think you'd better call Dr. Ditmars right away. He has specialized knowledge about this type of poisoning.
Dr. Ditmars?
At the Zoological Gardens. You know.
Yes, that's right. Where's the phone book?
I have it right here, Doctor. Yeah. Yes, here's the number right here.
Right. Pretty bad, Myron?
Yes, but Dr. Ditmars will know what's best to do.
Dr. Ditmars speaking.
Dr. Ditmars, sorry to trouble you at this time of night, but could you come over to Caledonia Hospital now on an emergency case?
Caledonia Hospital? You must have the wrong number. I'm not that kind of doctor.
I know, but we've got a boy here who's been bitten by a Gila monster.
Gila monster?
Yes.
Can you tell where the fangs pierced?
It's his hand, but we can't tell exactly where. Too much swelling.
All right. Make an incision in the swollen area to induce drainage.
Yes.
See that the bleeding is profuse.
Yes.
If you do that at once, you'll be all right. Gila venom is similar to a rattlesnake's, but not so high in toxicity.
I see.
If the symptoms become alarming, and you begin to get any signs of breaking down of tissue, then call this number, Tremont 84596.
Tremont 84596. Yes.
They'll get a messenger with serum over to you very shortly.
Thank you, Dr. Ditmars. Nurse, the scalpel. We haven't time for an anesthetic, Myron. Are you game?
Sure. I'm game.
The doctors dressed Myron's wound in accordance with Dr. Ditmars' telephone instructions, and Myron recovered. And those 4 calls give only the merest indication of the vital part played by the telephone during every minute of human life. There's a saying which goes, give me a nation's songs, and I'll write that nation's history. And the songwriters, like the playwrights, are sure to reflect the life and times and the manners and customs of the people. From Hello, My Baby in 1899 to the present day, the telephone has inspired writers of popular songs. And Ray Kostelanetz has prepared an arrangement of some of these songs in honor of the 50th anniversary of the AT&T. And now, Mr. Kostelanetz.
Hello, Frisco, hello. Hello, New York, hello.
Some rainy afternoon, I'll arrange for a quiet little spoon. Think of all the joy and bliss. We can hug and we can
talk about the weather.
We can have a quiet little walk.
I will see that my mother takes a walk.
Mum's the word when we meet. Be a mason, don't repeat. Angel eyes, are you wise? Goodbye.
Hello, my baby, hello, my honey, hello, my ragtime gal. Send me a kiss by wire, baby, my heart's on fire. If you refuse me, honey, you lose me, then you'll be left alone. Oh, baby, telephone and tell me I's your own. Hello, hello, hello there.
Hello there. 1119, please hold the line.
Hello, is this Mickey Mouse?
Yes, this is Mickey Mouse. Who's calling up my house?
This is Pluto, your doggy Pluto. I won't be home tonight. Woof, woof.
Well, watch your step now. Don't get in a fight.
Hello there. This is the man on the flying trapeze, and I'd like to make a call.
Aren't you afraid you'll fall?
No, not at all. Oh, he floats through the air with the greatest of ease, while the girl at the switchboard says,
What number, please?
He says, give me broccoli 3, 4, 5, 6, but he keeps right on doing his tricks.
Hello, little piggies.
Who are you, please?
I am the big bad wolf. Woof.
Listen, you big bad wolf. You're just a lot of foof.
I'm going to eat you next time I meet ya.
You and who else poo-poo? Mr. Big Bad Wolf will just hang up on you.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my ragtime gal. Oh, baby, telephone. And tell me I'm your own.
Hello.
Hello.
Dramatic is the tale of the telephone. Let's turn the calendar back for a few moments to the year 1875, before there was any telephone. One afternoon, while tuning steel springs in search of the multiple telegraph principle, Dr. Bell and his assistant Thomas A. Watson accidentally discovered that the overtones of a steel spring could be transmitted by wire. With that knowledge, Dr. Bell realized that he was on the verge of transmitting human speech by wire. And for months, Bell and Watson continued their experiments on the top floor of Bell's boarding house on Exeter Place in Boston, where a wire had been set up connecting the front and back rooms. And on the evening of March the 10th, 1876, we find Bell and Watson beginning another session of experiment. Watson is showing Bell a new transmitter he's made that day according to Bell's directions.
There it is, Mr. Bell. I trust that's just what you wanted.
Let's see. Yes, Mr. Watson, that's all right.
That big mouthpiece certainly looks queer. More like a coal scuttle than anything else.
Yes, it does. Now, you take this little telegraph receiver down the hall to my bedroom to listen with.
All right, Mr. Bell. Shall I move these batteries? Are they in your way?
No, they're all right. Nothing in them but water and a little acid.
All right. It won't take me long to get to the other room and be ready.
Close the doors carefully, Mr. Watson. We want a real test of this.
I'll be ready in a minute.
Let's see now. What do I say to him? Something that'll be a real test. Something he'll not expect. I'm tired tonight. Oh, those confounded batteries. Mr. Watson, come here. I want you. I might have known. Mr. Watson, come here. I want you.
Oh, Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell, I heard every word you said.
What do you mean? I haven't tested the instrument. I knocked over those batteries and spilled acid on my clothes. I was calling for help.
But I heard you speaking.
You mean you heard me over the telephone?
Yes, of course. I heard every word distinctly.
What could have been more appropriate than that the first telephone message, Mr. Watson, come here, I want you, was an emergency call and therefore typical of the great service the telephone was to render to mankind. Another great moment in the story of the telephone occurred 3 months later on a Sunday in June of the same year, 76, the International Centennial in Philadelphia, where the telephone was being exhibited. And toward the end of the inspection day, the judges are tired out. It's been a hard day. It's over 100 degrees in the shade. And Bell has spent the day following the judges hopefully, but as they pause, Bell is discouraged, for it now looks as if he wouldn't get the chance to explain his invention.
Then it is agreed, gentlemen, we stand adjourned for the day.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bell. I hoped we could go right on to your most interesting exhibit.
I thank you, sir. I sincerely appreciate your kind interest.
Let us ask our distinguished visitor, His Majesty Dom Pedro, Emperor of Brazil, if he has enjoyed the exhibit.
Yes. Your Majesty, we trust that you found our exposition interesting.
Indeed, yes, gentlemen. There are many wonderful things that we have seen today. And what is this? Why, my good friend, Mr. Bell, I have not seen you since your deaf class at the university in Boston.
I am honored that you remember me, sir. My exhibit was to have been the next thing on the program.
What? Have you invented something?
Yes, Your Majesty.
In that case, we must see it without fail. What is it?
An apparatus to talk through a telegraph line.
What? I think I cannot have understood.
Well, perhaps Your Majesty would like to test the instrument.
Indeed, I would. A splendid idea.
Now just hold this to your ear, Your Majesty, if you please, and I'll show you.
Yes.
I'll go across the hall where there's a second instrument, and I'll talk to you.
Very well. This is strange. If he is going to explain his invention to me, why does he go away? Oh, well, a good soldier must obey.
That is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question.
Oh, my God. He talks.
Thus came the first recognition of the telephone. Today, you can lift the receiver of the phone in your home or the instrument on your desk and get speedy connection with 93% of all the telephones in the world. There's hardly any comparison that can be made between the telephone of the early days and of this day. The telephone conversation of those early days required a great deal of shouting and screaming, and to understand the message at the other end required conscious effort and tough eardrums. The first telephone operators were boys, but boys being boys were sometimes careless about their attitude and sometimes about their language toward subscribers, and so women operators supplanted them. Telephone work for women was a big step in their advance in the business world. These women operators are very carefully selected and trained. In all their work, they lay stress on these three features: courtesy, accuracy, and speed. Such has been the progress of telephony that today the Bell system handles 24 billion calls a year, more than 800 completed calls every second of every business day. Progress has been such that the grand system which Bell visioned is now a more complete and effective reality than even his vision encompassed. It has drawn our own country together. It has leaped the seas. It has made every one of us an Aladdin with a magic lamp. We lift a finger, the world rushes to us. We're a little nearer to the gods because of the vision, the genius, and the toil of devoted men upon whose brows destiny placed her bright finger. Ted Houston is coming toward the microphone. Looks very much as if he had big news for us. Is that right, Ted?
You bet that's right, Ed. Real news. We're about to hear a 1935 demonstration of the telephone that I'll wager few of our audience have any idea can be done. I've just put in a call for 5 different people in 5 different cities. When the operator is ready with all 5, I'll get on the wire, too. That will make 6 of us all on the same wire at the same time. Then we'll have a round-robin conversation by telephone. Each of us will hear and talk to the others. Of course, for these radio demonstrations, a special wire network has been used. The operator said the call would be ready in a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, Andre Kostelanetz will give us Blow Gabriel Blow from the popular show Anything Goes. Andre Kostelanetz and his orchestra and chorus. Hello?
Mr. Husing, ready with the 5 people on your conference connection.
Oh, thank you. Hello? Are you all there?
Yes, right here.
Oh, certainly sounds as if everyone were present, but just to make sure, I'm going to call the roll and see if all 5 of you are really on the wire and speaking from where we think you are. We'll start with Miss Grace Moore, America's Queen of Song. Hello, Miss Moore.
Right here, Mr. Husing, speaking from Hollywood, California.
Mr. Rufus Dawes, President of the Century of Progress.
Hello, Mr. Husing. I'm speaking from Chicago.
Dr. Carl Compton, President of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Present in Boston.
Admiral Cary T. Grayson, Chairman of the American Red Cross.
Present, speaking from Washington, D.C.
Mr. Dizzy Dean, the most talked-about man in baseball today.
Right here, Ted, in the dugout at Sportsman's Park in St. Louis.
All accounted for. Well, Diz, what do you think about the Cards' chances of winning the pennant this year, and how many games do you think you'll chalk up?
Well, we're off to a fairly good start, Ted. It isn't going to be as easy as last year, though. As I told the newspaper men a week or so ago, I'd say that me and Paul would win 45 games this season, and the Cards will win the pennant by about an eyelash.
Say, your predictions came true last year, all right, Dizzy, and I wish you the best of luck.
Well, if we don't end up on top of the leap, I go to Hollywood and file for a job as an extra. Will you help me out, Miss Moore?
I certainly will, Dizzy. When you finish the ball season, come on out and we'll give you a screen test.
Say, if I were you, Dizzy, I wouldn't forget that offer.
Don't worry, Ted. I won't.
Miss Moore, I hear your new picture will be wonderful. Won't you tell us something about it?
Well, it's just being completed, Mr. Husing. I love the story. It's modern and very human, and with the greatest and most beloved of all the musical numbers. And Columbia has given it such a beautiful production.
Say, I'll never forget One Night of Love. I mean the picture. What's the new one called?
It's called Love Me Forever. It sounds like a request, doesn't it, Mr. Husing?
Say.
Well, I do hope and I do think that you will enjoy it even more than One Night of Love. You can't imagine how exciting it is to be talking to you all at once. Mr. Dawes, as one of America's leaders of industry, I suppose it's no thrill at all for you to be telephoning all around the country.
Perhaps the novelty has worn off a little, Miss Moore, but the indispensability hasn't. We found it necessary to install 1,700 telephones on the grounds of a Century of Progress.
I'll never forget the AT&T exhibit at the Century of Progress. It was full of miracles, wasn't it, Mr. Dawes?
Yes, it was, Mr. Husing. Of course, this is only the 50th anniversary of the AT&T. When its Century of Progress is broadcast, I hesitate to predict the miracles it will demonstrate.
Mm-hmm. Say, Dr. Compton, as president of MIT, I suppose you're training some of the young men who will help perform some of these future miracles.
Yes, Mr. Husing. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology is sending a number of men into the field of communications. I believe there are some 300 of our graduates now associated with the telephone company. Mr. Husing, may I ask Admiral Grayson a question?
You certainly may, Dr. Compton. Go right ahead.
Admiral Grayson, as our new chairman of the American Red Cross and the White House physician to 3 presidents, I'm sure the whole nation would like to know if you have any recipe for health.
Now, there's one thing I refuse to do by telephone, Dr. Compton. Diagnose and prescribe for the nation. But if you want what I believe to be the 5 of the greatest secrets of health, they are system, diet, sleep, exercise, and a sense of humor. I think that humor is even more important than sleep in keeping a president of the United States sane in the midst of the great pressure and strain he is under at all times.
President Taft was quite noted for his good humor, wasn't he, Admiral Grayson?
Yes, he was, Miss Moore. He met every situation with a smile. I'll never forget the day before the inauguration of Mr. Wilson in 1913. After Mr. Taft had, of course, been defeated, he invited Mr. and Mrs. Wilson to the White House, and he was the soul of hospitality. As they arrived, he said, "Mr. Wilson, this is a fine house to live in, and I hope you will enjoy it as much as I have. I leave it with keen regret, but as you know, with the unmistakable consent of the American people."
Just right.
Story. Quite typical. Well, this has been lots of fun talking to all of you in different parts of the country. Many thanks to you all.
Goodbye, Mr. Husing.
Bye, Mr. Husing.
Goodbye. I'm sure every one of you listening will be interested to know that the type of call you heard a moment ago is not as rare as you probably think. It is known as a conference service, and it enables a group of people in widely separated centers to talk together at one time. Now, with us today is a distinguished gentleman whose books, short stories, and plays are undoubtedly familiar to you. He is the author of those great plays, The Fool, The Enemy, and The House Beautiful. He is an inveterate world traveler and keen student of human nature. We are happy to have him here today, his first time on the air, Mr. Channing Pollock.
We have heard a great deal in the last few minutes about a machine called the telephone, and very little about the men and women behind that telephone. And they seem to me really the most important part of the whole business. Nobody ever made anything any better than the men and women behind it. We are proud, in some ways justly proud, of our machine age. We have conquered space and distance. We soar into the skies, send our voices round the world, and turn out brave, strong, dependable miracles of productiveness. But unless the spirit of man soars with the machine, unless you and I and our fellows are brave and strong and dependable too, that machine and all the other machines are merely slag and scrap iron. No age ever has been, no age ever will be greater than the men and women who live in it. Most of us must realize the marvel and mechanical perfection of the telephone and the telephone system. Iron, steel, copper, millions of miles of wire putting millions of human beings in contact with one another. That contact was never more urgently necessary than one night in 1908 when a cloudburst in New Mexico turned a little stream called the Dry Cimarron into a rushing torrent tumbling through the canyon to destroy the village of Folsom 10 miles away. Somebody telephoned. The river is flooded. The valley is doomed. Warn everybody. Now, you can warn everybody by telephone. In most emergencies, you can't do it any other way. But the telephone alone, marvel that it is, the telephone alone can't warn anybody. Slag and scrap iron without the men and women behind it. The woman at the switchboard in Folsom that night was 68 years old, gray-haired and frail, but she stuck to her post and began calling ranch house after ranch house. The flood struck. Buildings were shattered, torn from their foundations, swept down the valley. 68-year-old Sarah J. Rook went right on calling, warning, run for your lives, until she and her switchboard and her little home were swallowed up and carried away in that raging torrent. 7 months later, on a ranch 8 miles away, they found the body of Sally Rook. And over her resting place, 4,000 of her fellow employees built a granite monument to tell the world of a woman who glorified her calling by sacrificing her own life that others might live. Millions of phones. It's easy now to make telephones, but oh, it's hard to make men. When Theodore N. Vail, president of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, died in 1920, there was created the Vail Memorial Fund, from which awards are made annually to reward and commemorate noteworthy public service on the part of telephone employees. Since then, 10 gold and 77 silver medals and 845 bronze medals have been awarded. 932 medals, marking 932 noteworthy public services, 932 acts of courage, fortitude, and devotion to duty on the part of the men and women behind the telephone. And that is not all. Last year, the entire personnel of the telephone companies in Southern California were cited for courageous, untiring, and self-sacrificing efforts during and after the earthquake of 1933. Every man and woman in 2 companies at his or her post of duty and carrying on. You should read those citations. I have, all the 932 of them, for initiative, resourcefulness, and effective action in giving aid to the victims of an aeroplane accident, in capturing bandits, in maintaining or restoring service in every emergency, and in the face of every conceivable hazard of fire, flood, and disaster. They shall not pass was the heroic defiance of the wartime French. The play must go on is the theater's gallant axiom that has made romance. But equally heroic, equally gallant and romantic, I think, is that phrase, the message must get through, the slogan, the religion of these soldiers of the telephone. Let me tell you another typical example of telephone heroism. In 1923, Charles Irwin Ryder was a station installer of the Bell Telephone Company at Guthrie, Oklahoma. A train of tank cars was derailed on a bridge. One or more of them blew up, and the Cimarron River was covered with blazing oil and gasoline. Ryder rushed to the scene. The main north and south toll lines of the company had been destroyed by the flames. Putting out in a boat on what was literally a river of fire, Ryder rode to within 25 feet of the burning bridge, upon which stood one last tank car of gasoline that might explode any moment. With blistered hands, back and forth he rode, carrying the ends of telephone circuits. Until 11 hours later, service was restored, and Ryder pulled ashore, his job done, and himself the last man to leave the scene. Now let us hear the story of the heroism of Mrs. Myrtle Ethel Hadley. It is the night of March 22nd, 1923. The scene is the switchboard room of the telephone exchange in Snyder, Oklahoma. Mrs. Hadley, who is the substitute operator, is working the board. With her in the room is her young daughter.
Goodness, honey, it's 11 o'clock. Way past your bedtime.
Oh, I'm not sleepy, Mommy, honest. Can't I stay until Daddy comes?
Oh, no. Why, he may be over at the electric plant all night. He's got a lot of work to do before the new city water wheel is finished. You run along now, dear. Listen. What's that?
It's the whistle over at the electric plant.
Oh, there must be a fire.
Oh, I hope Daddy's all right.
Quiet now till I call and find out. Funny they wouldn't have called me before to turn in the alarm. Hello. Hello, electric plant. Hello?
Hello?
This is Mrs. Hadley over at the telephone company. What's your siren blowing for?
We've had a terrible accident over here, Mrs. Hadley.
An accident?
We've had a cave-in in the new water well, and your husband and the three fellas working with him have been buried in it.
Oh, no. Well, can't you do something? Can't you dig them out?
We're doing all we can.
Never mind.
We need help. Doctors and men to help us dig.
Well, I'll get who I can. You keep digging. Maybe it won't be too late.
Oh, Mommy.
Hello.
Mommy, is Daddy hurt?
It'll be all right, dear. Now, don't cry. I've got to call and find men to go over there and help.
Oh, Mommy. Mommy,
Hello.
let us go and help
Hello. No,
Daddy.
dear. We've got to stay here. Daddy wouldn't want me to leave the switchboard. Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
What do you want?
Listen, Mr. Brown. This is Mrs. Hadley at the telephone company. There's been an accident at the electric plant. The water well's caved in. 4 men have been buried under. Hurry. Hurry. Go over and help.
Right away.
Hello. Hello.
Hello?
Hello, Dr. Bryce.
Yes, this is Dr.
They need you right away at the electric plant. The new water well's caved in, and 4 men are buried underneath. Please go right away. Hello.
And so Myrtle Hadley stays at her post, rushing through call after call, summoning help. For 50 minutes, she works the switchboard prayerfully, hoping to get some word of the fate of her husband and his 3 fellow workers. Her calls completed, she sits staring vacantly at the board, her sobbing daughter clasped in her arms.
Never mind, dear. Don't cry. It's going to be all right. They'll call soon.
Oh, Mommy. Mommy, why did it have to happen to Daddy?
Don't cry, dear. Shh. There's a call now. Please, God. Hello?
Oh, hello, Myrtle.
Paul. Paul, are you all right?
Oh, Daddy.
Banged up some, but I got out of it alive. I managed to catch hold of a bucket just as it caved in, so I didn't go down so deep as the others.
Oh, Paul.
Do you think you can leave soon and come home?
Just as soon as I get a relief operator, honey. Just a few minutes.
Mrs. Hadley stuck to her post, in the midst of her sorrow, sent help to the afflicted ones, and Providence sent back her husband to her alive. Well, that's what's back of the telephone, that you pick up as a matter of course to say, "Hello, is that you, darling? Can you come over tonight to play bridge?" Or to say, "Give me the doctor, my baby's sick." Or, "For God's sake, get me a policeman, quick." The doctor comes, or the policeman, as a matter of course. So much as a matter of course that you'd hardly believe it if just once out of thousands of times you picked up that phone and nothing happened. To prevent that, hard rubber and sensitive instruments and copper wire are not enough. You've got to have men, real men, and women, real women, and those noteworthy acts of courage and devotion to public service cited in the Vail Awards. I salute you, men and women of the Bell system. We need machines, but oh, how much more greatly we need men and women. How much more greatly we need to believe that even in these depressing times, courage and loyalty, courtesy and fidelity, honor and devotion to duty have not passed from the world. To believe in the heroic makes heroes, the Israelis said. The Vail Memorial is making heroes as well as rewarding them, creating that spirit which puts noble behavior above fear of suffering and death, that spirit without which, in and out of the telephone service, mere scientific achievement is sheer futility, and civilization itself something less than approach to fulfillment of man's high destiny.
Thank you, Mr. Pollock. In the historical library of the AT&T, we came across an old piece of music called the Telephone March. We found that it was the first piece of music written and dedicated to the telephone. It was composed by E. Mack and copyrighted in 1877, only 1 year after the invention of the telephone. I wish you could see the cover of this old piece of music. It shows a man playing the cornet into an early box telephone with wires carrying his notes to audiences in Boston, in China, in Ireland, and to an Indian on the Western Plains, an artist's unconscious prophecy of the telephone's offspring of today, radio. Here it is, the Telephone March, played by Andre Kostelanetz and his orchestra. And here's our chief operator, Edwin C. Hill.
Consider the telephone in this, its golden jubilee year of national service. Omnipresent and all essential, it is used more than 60 million times a day by the American people. The story of the telephone is winged with prophecy and fired with imagination. Go back, if you please, to the AT&T charter granted 50 years ago. That charter visioned communication with the whole world by cable and other appropriate means. But the founders had no notion at all of what the appropriate means would be, though they had absolute certainty that their prophecy would be made good by the men who were to come after them. And that indeed has come to pass. The American Telephone and Telegraph Company is the heart of our telephone system, just as the bell companies of the different states or districts are the arteries. Not only is the telephone everywhere, but it is economical enough to encourage use by everybody. In this country today, there are almost twice as many telephone calls in a year as there are telegrams and first-class letters combined. This brings me to a very agreeable part of our program. While we're celebrating the 50th year of AT&T, it's a coincidence that this also is the age of its president, Mr. Gifford. Just as Bell, the founder, and Vail, the organizer, Carty, the inspired engineer, and the rest of their associates through 4 decades justly earned the admiration of the world for their vision, energy, and genius, so Mr. Gifford, their successor, is the symbol in these latter days of the incomparable efficiency, the cool common sense, and the integrity for which the system has always stood. Everybody recognizes the man responsible for the safe and sane management which has forged unfalteringly through the Depression is the gentleman of whom I speak. With singularly clear vision, Walter Gifford was not stampeded into stock split-ups and other fantastic performances in those far-off boom years when all of us, more or less, were riding on pink clouds toward the millennium. It was 31 years ago that Mr. Gifford joined the company as a payroll clerk, $10 a week. From the ranks, he came up fast. At 40, when most successful men are just getting into their stride, he was the president of the company. He has one of those exact yet forward-looking minds which are the wonder of less gifted individuals. And now he forges ahead calmly, confident, utterly confident in the future of his country. I take great pleasure in presenting Mr. Walter S. Gifford, President of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I appreciate the privilege of saying just a word on this occasion. It is perhaps fitting when you are 50 years old to meditate for a few minutes on a Sunday on what has happened in the 50 years that are past and renew your faith in the future. In the present difficult times, we are all too apt to live in and for the moment, take counsel of the discouragements of the day, and to live in fear of dire happenings in the future, most of which, if we may learn from the experience of the past, never happened. The American Telephone and Telegraph Company is 50 years old. It has become a great American institution. It is owned by you and your neighbors in every state in the Union. It belongs to Main Street. More than half of its nearly 700,000 stockholders are women. Its nationwide organization, existing in substantially the same form for half a century, makes possible telephone service as we know it today. A telephone call is so easy to make that the person making the call has no idea of the complicated physical equipment and vast organization of workers behind it. Now, it obviously does not just happen that practically anyone, anywhere, any time of the day or night, can talk promptly with anyone else, anywhere else in this country, or for that matter, almost anywhere in the world. Now, does it just happen that the number of telephones per 100 population in the United States is more than 16 times the average of that for the rest of the world, and is nearly 50% higher than in any country in Europe? It is the result of the free play of individual initiative and ability, fostered and given free rein during all these years in an institution which recognizes the American ideal of equal opportunity for each individual to develop to the fullest his talents and personality. I want to express my admiration of the great army of telephone workers, over 250,000 in number, in all ranks of responsibility, who are engaged in operation, research, manufacturing, and the many other activities necessary for furnishing telephone service to the 125 million people of our country. These men and women, as Mr. Pollock has pointed out, are not only courageous and resourceful in emergencies, they are skillful and thoughtfully courteous in their day-to-day activities. They are determined to get the message through. During the World War, I was privileged to serve as Director of the Council of National Defense. I had a unique opportunity to see what Americans can do when the occasion demands. The spirit of enthusiasm and optimism was invincible. Instead of trying to prove that the possible couldn't be done, everyone was trying to see how the impossible, or what seemed impossible, could be and was done. It is this typical American spirit that assures our country getting out of its present difficulties. It is this spirit that has built up the Bell system, an institution that every minute of the day performs what 50 years ago would have seemed impossible miracles. In the telephone company, our policy and our method of operating is based on the long pull. We are celebrating 150 years and looking into the next. Practically everyone uses the telephone, and most of the money in the business is the life savings of people, and most of the work in it is done by people who devote their lives to it. We shall continue our efforts to further improve telephone service and make it more economical for the user. We shall continue to try to keep the Bell system an attractive institution for people to work in and safe for investors. Above all, we shall continue to strive to merit the goodwill and the esteem of our fellow citizens and keep the American Telephone and Telegraph Company an institution that the American people can be proud of.
Thank you, Mr. Gifford. We have swung through 50 stirring years, indeed, from the first timid, faint telephone signal of our grandfather's day to the great world network of modern telephonic communications. It was Elihu Root who said many years ago that nations, like men, are apt to become friendly as they know each other better, And since populations may not travel physically, nor millions move over land and sea en masse to visit distant lands, it may be that the telephone is reserved by destiny for the purpose of better acquainting the sons of men with each other, nations and races. It may be that for the telephone, in the providence of the Almighty, is reserved the greatest of all accomplishments, to bring about, as Lincoln said, a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. It may be that the kinship of the telephone will bring about the prophecy of Tennyson. Ring in the nobler modes of life, sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace.
This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.